going on, Nerds of Color viewers? This is Lauren Lola coming to you with a brand new interview. I am so excited to share this conversation I had with Pod of Rebellion. For those who don't know, Pod of Rebellion is a Star Wars rewatch podcast from iHeart Media, where each episode breaks down each of the episodes of Star Wars Rebels and also goes in depth on behind the scenes stories of each episode and also some minutia that was picked up along the way. Joining me for this conversation are Jon Lee Brody, who is the moderator for the podcast, JC Reifenberg, who is the fact checker, and also featuring three of the original cast members from Star Wars Rebels, Vanessa Marshall, who voiced Hera Syndulla, Tiya Sircar, who voiced Sabine Wren, and Taylor Gray, who voiced Ezra Bridger. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since I found out that this podcast was going to be happening. And as a Star Wars fan, as some of you may be well aware of, Star Wars Rebels is one of my favorites from the franchise. So to gain to, relive the episodes through the eyes of the actors and also getting to learn some information about what was going on behind the scenes I didn't know before, has just been really cool. And getting to talk to them about it, has been next level. So I'm very excited for you all to check out this conversation. Heads up, there are some spoilers for some of the future episodes of Star Wars Rebels. They just finished recording for season 1, so just an FYI. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Here's my conversation with the crew of Pod of Rebellion. This was mentioned in the episode where you had Dante Basco as a guest, but for those who don't know, what is the origin story of Pod of Rebellion?
Well, yeah, so we were at UwuCon in Arizona with Dante, and Dante was saying how much fun he was having doing his rewatch podcast, and he said, "Why don't you guys have one?" And we all sort of looked at each other and we were like, "Yeah, that's a really good question. We're not sure." And so we thought more about it, and we realized that we have so much fun doing panels at Comic-Cons together and spending that time with fans. And we thought, why don't we bring that to people through a podcast? And it's a lot cheaper than trying to get a pass and a ticket and all the cost of going to an event. Not to keep people from going to those events, but we just figured it was a better way to bring the panels to them. And I spoke to a friend of mine, Holly Fry, who works at iHeartRadio. And I said, do you think that they would ever be interested in a rewatch? And she was like, I don't know. It's a very niche thing, but I can run it up the chain. I'll let you know. And she did. And turns out they thought it would be a great idea. And there you have it. It went from there. So we thank Dante for putting the idea in our heads, and one thing led to another, and here we are, and it's been just as fun as we had hoped.
Yeah, I've been following along with the episodes, and it sounds like you all are having a blast. Although it is interesting to hear you say, Vanessa, that whoever was at iHeart was saying that it's a niche podcast genre, which I don't know, but I feel like that's like the exact opposite. I feel like rewatch podcasts have become so popular in recent years.
Oh, no. And not that the rewatch concept is not niche, but
Hmm.
Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars. Really? They thought that Star Wars was niche?
It can be seen as such, but when people say like, oh, but the Star Wars brand, and I said, well, have you been to a celebration? They're like, yeah, but that's a specific thing. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy. I mean, I'm not the one to ask because Star Wars is my life. So I am, through my perspective, it's everything, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, my best friend for years said, "Oh, you're doing one of your Star War things." I was like, "There's a few wars. It's plural."
My dad still says that to me.
My dad tells his friends that his daughter is on a Star Trek show. So,
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Awesome.
bless him.
Anyway,
He
but
thinks it's the same thing.
the people who know, but not everyone cares, apparently. So, they just weren't sure that they could create that it would be worth trying to carve out that space in the podcast arena, although there are 10 billion Star Wars podcasts indeed. But anyway, you never know. Honestly, it's I knew that from what I see at these events, the fans, the love that we have for each other, the mutual admiration and respect is something that's so palpable and really meaningful that I knew that it would be worth it, but sometimes people just don't see it. And luckily they did.
Oh yeah, you were definitely seen.
I feel like
Awesome.
Vanessa always had that confidence that we would have an audience, and I feel like Taylor and I were a little more apprehensive in that we know that there are so many Star Wars podcasts out there in the world, and so we were like, I don't know, is anyone going to listen to this? I mean, our show premiered 10 years, or now it's been 11 years, but when Dante presented us with this idea and he was like, "What are you guys doing?" It was coming up on our 10-year anniversary. We were like, "What a
Mhm.
great idea, and also B, great time to do it, 10-year anniversary, like a great time to start like kind of looking back and reminiscing really." But I think Taylor and I are a little hesitant that like, does anyone want to listen to us gab about our show? And thankfully, we were not wrong, but we were, that Vanessa was right, and John and JC, that yeah, we've, that people have seemed to be enjoying like us talking about, kind of walking down memory lane, and it's been wonderful. The reaction and um, fan sort of uh, like their involvement has been really lovely to see.
And also, the next phase of it was me calling John and begging him to help us and be a part of it because he's been part of the Star Wars Rebels family all along. We've played a bunch of role-playing games. Tia was not present. She was filming, no doubt, but Taylor and I played these things, and soon, Tia, you shall play. Don't worry. Um, but yeah, I reached out to John, knowing his incredible knowledge of Star Wars and his ability as an actor, a writer, producer, a Yoda, if you will, of sorts. And
Just a
um,
little taller than Yoda.
And a little less green.
A little less green. It was just a little less green.
and that led us to JC. And
Yeah.
what I enjoy today is I actually get requests for John to be on podcasts representing us. And I'm like, yeah, it makes me so happy. There's a podcast down in Texas that wants to have him on. And I was like, well, I'll just forward that on. And other people that I run into when I was at Celebration in Japan, JC, you have fans. They're like, it's the fact check, man. People really, it's like a thing. And so to me, like I kind of space mom out. I get a little proud. I'm like, so it's not only just the nerd ball panel that, we bring all over the place. This is something very special with the addition of John and JC. So you'll have to start coming to conventions with us is my point.
Well, look, if those organizers are going to extend the invites out, I can't speak on behalf of JC, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to accept those invites. But this just goes to show how we literally had this conversation this morning because, as I told you, Lauren, we were recording episodes this morning, and
Mhm.
how kismet it is that these three played the characters that they play. And you see that Hera's obviously, she's such the leader, she's such a boss with the Ghost Crew. And you just see what Vanessa did in terms of taking this to her friend Holly at iHeart and then getting up the ladder. And then when she called me, it wasn't to join the show. At least I didn't perceive it that way. I was happy to be a resource. It wasn't until later I realized that that was her plan all along, which I was always so thankful for. But it's just like it was. I was just like, oh, like you want me in front of you want me to be part of the moderator, and then that came JC. I'm like, well, people, it's always nice when you have like an expert who can be like your in-house encyclopedia, because I know as a fan, if I listen to a rewatch and the actors may not get a fact right or wrong, I don't get upset at it because the actor's responsibility isn't to know those things. They're to play their part, know
Mhm.
their lines,
Yeah.
play it truthfully. But when we have someone like JC as like our Mandalorian body armor with trivia, it
Human
gives us
Wikipedia.
That's
100%.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wait,
for me, it was just exciting because John and I met years ago and found out that we grew up like one town over from one
Yeah.
another and never knew each other, which is also the same area that Sam Witwer was from. So I felt very connected in this way. And John and I have been trying to work together for years. And once they kind of got this thing going, Jon reached out and was like, "Hey, would you be interested?" I was like, "Yes." A single Star War? I'm all about the Star War.
JC, I feel like we now need to get you a vanity license plate that just says fact check man, but without any of the vowels. Fact check man.
I have to ask about that, JC, because it's a podcast, like it's mainly audio. And while there are some social media clips, it's, you're not posting the visual episodes online yet. But like how do you do it? Like, are you like back checking from memory and then you're double checking online? Like, how do you do it?
So yeah, basically it's that. I know I have a very long Star Wars trivia tale to my life. And so a lot of times they'll say something, and while I might not know everything about it, I will know that, like, I'll know one fact about it and I'll be like, "Oh, like they mentioned Children of the Jedi, and I know that that was a book written by Barbara Hambly, but I didn't necessarily remember it was like 1997." So I'll like go in and I'll look up that the book came out in 1997, or just kind of like fact check myself to make sure my memory is correct on a lot of it. But I would say, yeah, about 50% of the fact check is off the top of my head, and 50% of it is something that they say that triggers a memory or a thought that I had about, oh, the interrogation droid that shows up in that episode of Rebels. Didn't I read that he had diabetes and that was connected to why he put that in episode 1, or in episode 4? And then I'll go and I'll get the actual facts on how I was remembering that.
Some of us choose to believe that everything that JC
Yes.
says on our podcast is just living deep within his brain somewhere, and he's just able to access it, when called upon.
Yeah, he's actually being modest. He wants to be relatable to like the common person who may not know this knowledge, which we always admire, but we all know what's really going on there. So you all can choose what to believe, but even though we all know the truth.
I mean, had I not asked, I would have assumed it just came straight from his head and then nowhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like kind of going back to earlier, like, yeah, there's a lot of Star Wars podcasts out there, but I think this one's particularly unique for 2 reasons. One of them is that how many Star Wars podcasts out there are hosted by the actors who starred on said show. And number 2, you were releasing during the 20th anniversary year of Lucasfilm Animation, which I think is pretty special.
So are you saying that we're the best one?
She's not saying it.
I don't know. I hear things in very weird ways.
I heard it too. So
yeah, I started a few of those other ones. I'm really covering the board and just seeing which one goes, but I think this is the one.
So for Vanessa, Taylor, and Tiya, how, if at all, has your relationship with your character changed since doing the podcast?
Well, I hadn't even seen every episode, so I'm learning more about Ezra every week, which is incredible. But I think we grow, like all of us as humans, every day we're sort of growing and changing and becoming new. And it's funny to kind of experience yourself again, or a version of yourself. It's like when you watch home family videos once you're older, and they mean something different, and you see parts of yourself in it, and you see things that remind you of other, like I see Vanessa and Tiya in different ways when I look back at the episodes, but we've changed so much, and so much sort of slips through the cracks that you forget. It's been really sweet and nostalgic, and I love Ezra so much more from getting time away from it and then rewatching it all.
I agree with everything you just said, which is rare. No, I'm kidding. I feel like I've said this on our podcast, but when I watched each episode when it aired, or when Lucasfilm and Disney would screen the big episodes for us at Disney. But I haven't watched a single episode since. So it's been 10 years-ish, since I experienced these the first time. And I'm, like a lot of actors, I'm highly critical of watching my own performances, whether it's on screen or animation. So I feel like I'm getting to enjoy watching so much more and free of any like judgment or self-criticism or so I'm able to just like enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey, enjoy our characters and the storyline so much more because I'm not watching kind of through like, ba with bated breath. Um, and I think also because we are not three actors that worked on this thing 10 years ago and haven't seen each other since, and now we're sort of like getting to reconnect or something. Like we have been friends ever since, and with Freddie and Steve as well as like our other actor friends from the show, like D. Bradley Baker and Ashley Eckstein, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like when I watch the show now, I know these guys even better than I did at the time, and we had become very close very quickly. So it's really special to watch these performances because they are so inextricably linked with who these people are and these actors are and my friends are. And so it's just kind of like feels like an inside joke when I see like Hera make a facial expression that is so Vanessa, or Taylor has some kind of smirk or something that's sorry, I meant Ezra. Did I say Taylor? See what I'm talking about? But it's so Taylor, and because I know these guys so well, it's just fun to watch the show because it feels like I'm just hanging out with my friends or watching my friends, you know?
Yeah, I am impressed by Hera's discipline even more so than I was in the moment. I'm also able to notice things sort of thematically. We just finished watching the season finale for season one, and Sabine does something to the Imperial Station. I don't remember if it was the electric charges or actually if it was Kanan, throwing the Inquisitor into whatever battery cell that was. There's some explosion, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's the pink color that we later see when Kanan sacrifices himself. They did use that color earlier in season one. I didn't
Mm.
remember that. So, whoa, oh, that foreshadows, I mean, so there are these sort of meta moments where looking at sort of the artistic flow of things, I am even more moved as an observer of how this story was laid out. I thought when Kanan made that sacrifice, oh, I've never seen that pink in anime. I've never seen that color of the explosion ever. And then I thought, no, I actually did see it, but it didn't strike me the first time because I didn't know where we were going to end up. But now I have the full narrative, so I'm able to appreciate that more. Equally, I, in the moment, was so focused on the tasks at hand that I didn't notice at the end of the season when Kanan comes back that I say, yes, dear. I called him dear and I hugged
Mhm.
him. And there
Mhm.
was like a sitcom, romantic rom-com moment between like mom and dad that didn't hit me. That seems so out of character in a weird way because most of what I remembered is all the other times that she was focused on the task at hand and not um, indulging in anything like that. That moment meant even more to me. It was so sweet. So anyway, I'm just touched and moved by different things that I don't know that I took the time to observe, playing it full out as each moment arose. So in the rewatching, I'm able to get sort of a deeper sense of what was going on so many more levels. So it's a richer experience for me.
Yeah, yeah. Using that example in particular, I'm just like, wow, I don't even remember that from that episode. And I rewatched Rebels 2 years ago.
I hadn't noticed it. Obviously, I wouldn't have known the first time I watched it, but it just hits differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's one of the things I like. One of the things I like about this podcast is that normally with rewatch podcasts, it's like slowly making your way beat by beat through what happens in each episode. But John, you just do it all at the beginning and throwing in pop culture references as you do so. And then everything else is more about the focus on the minutia and the behind the scenes stories of the making of said episode. And
Yeah,
so I'm just curious, how did you figure out the format for each of the episodes of how that was going to unfold?
well, that
I
was
think
one
we
of the first
did like 3
discussions.
takes, didn't we?
3 takes?
Yeah,
No,
two more
something
than
like
Clint Eastwood would give us, but
it.
yeah, we did our best. But no, that was one of the first conversations, which was because we all collectively saw this saturation of rewatch podcasts. And I listened to a lot of those. My friend has one on iHeart as well, and but I noticed that they all have a very similar format.
Hmm.
And not there's I have no issue with it, but for me, it's like when I was initially talking to Tia, Taylor, and Vanessa before we officially brought JC on, I said I really want to celebrate the three of you, just as artists, as people, and let's really, if you're willing to peel back the curtain and show them what was going on in the booth, that's really what's going to separate us. Because anyone can watch Rebels and know what happened. They're going to know the plot. You can go to Wikipedia. You can go to fan generated sites that'll tell you the plot points and have really in-depth breakdowns with time codes and everything. So we didn't want to dismiss what happened in the episode, so we landed on it was on a group text. I remember Vanessa, you had initially said, well, what if we did something at the top? Like we did some sort of a recap. I said, oh, this could be fun. How can I truncate down 23 to 30 minutes of television into like a paragraph? And then I said, oh, well, my own sensibility, and Lauren, I'm sure as you get to know me better, you'll see that I speak in many pop culture analogies. So it was really just speaking, you could argue my first language, uh, and integrating that into the recaps. And then really allowing the rest of the podcast for these three wonderful humans to share their wonderful stories.
I like that. I like that. And honestly, like just with how the recaps are done, like that alone feels like that could deserve its own writing award because I think they're just chef's kiss.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
Nice.
thank
yes.
you.
We agree. We agree.
We
We've been saying the
wholeheartedly
same.
agree. In fact, I can't wait to like now when I'm watching episodes to prepare for our next podcast session, I am like anxiously awaiting what sometimes obscure, most often hilarious, always hilarious, random sort of uh references to like pop culture, sports, history, politics. Like it's a delight. I know I say this to you all the
Uh,
time, John, but it is such a fun way to kick off every podcast.
and I'm gonna Venmo you later, so I
Yeah,
always
don't
appreciate.
forget.
And Vanessa, you kind of touched on this earlier about finding minutia within the animation alone that maybe you hadn't noticed in the past. But that kind of goes into something that I noticed has come up a lot, which is finding topics that resurface in Rebels that maybe aren't, I guess, intentionally mined as they were being written, but weirdly enough have become more relevant in time. A big topic in particular is mental health, which John, you just put out a solo episode about mental health that I thought was very beautifully done.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I'm trying to figure out a question for this, but like, I don't know, does it surprise you when details like that pop out? Like, to what extent do they surprise you? I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, no, no. Well, it's interesting. Mental health is something I care very much about. I've worked really hard on myself, and um, one of Hera's not flaws because it's what makes her interesting, but the way she puts the mission above everything else when she loses Kanan, the takeaway for me, if I'm looking at it from a mental health perspective that touches on my own uh the way I organize my world is that there's a lot of work and not a lot of play. And when Hera said, I thought I would have more time, I,
Mm,
that lesson, I mean, I don't know if that's sort of a mental health lesson so much as it is a self-care lesson. But when Kanan died, Filoni said that he put it in the middle of the season and not at the end because he wanted to show how we as a chosen family heal from that
yeah.
to let others in the community at large also know that we can get through anything together. And he kind of peeled back the curtain, if you will, on that moment to watch us grieve. And grief is something very human, normal, healthy, and nuanced and unique to each individual. No one grieves in the same way. But rewatching it, that's kind of what I'm paying attention to. So maybe there are other elements. I'm also well aware of Ezra's journey and his conflict and his loss of his parents and his commitment to honoring their memory and seeking them out. And, oftentimes in sort of the human journey, they talk about, if you survive trauma, how you emerge from it. Some people emerge from trauma as a perpetrator, others emerge from it as a healer. And neither is better or worse per se, meaning, Darth Vader emerges from his trauma, let's say, as a perpetrator, and um, you know, uh, Ezra from his chooses the path of a Jedi. They're not as simple as evil and good. They're nuanced and complex, and each deserves their own arc of healing. I'm aware of those beats, and I'm tracking them through this podcast more so than I was in the moment. One, I identify with the work play balance thing, but also the value of chosen family and getting through anything together as opposed to isolating. And the when I see Sabine's character in this past episode that I was just referring to, when Sabine is like dancing on the spaceships and outsmarting all these Imperials, to me as space mom, I look at that and I'm like, look at her go. Look at her go. Look at her trusting herself. Look at her spray painting this TIE fighter. Look at her expressing herself. That is so glorious to me that, I mean, it's just stuff like that. Like that to me from a mental health perspective is lovely. That's to me, through the support of a chosen family, Sabine is able to be more of who she is. I mean, I don't know what that was like for you, Tia, but it was exquisite to see this time around. And I don't know that it didn't really hit me when we were doing it in the moment. But so the rewatch affords me the ability to look at some of these elements of evolution of self that are important. And I'm not sure if that's a mental health thing or human evolution thing, but I delight in it all the same.
Or it could be both.
There you have it.
I also think that we have the luxury of like time and perspective. Like you were saying, Vanessa, that when we recorded these, season one episodes, we had no idea. I mean, we had a little bit of information about a little bit of stuff, right? About our own characters, but especially, or I can only speak for myself. Like I did not know, like I knew one tiny little iota of what I would learn about Sabine's past and her family and Mandalore, et cetera, the training, all of that. I had no idea until much later. And so seeing these things, obviously we didn't know anything about what was going to happen to Kanan. So watching these episodes now, knowing what we know and having that sort of perspective, it makes these moments so much more meaningful and emotional, I think, because having the knowledge of where things progress to is kind of gives these moments that we've experienced and discussed on the podcast thus far a different weight, a different texture, and far more added emotion, I think.
I mean, I would imagine you had expectations going into this podcast, and having done it as far as you have as of now, in what ways have they been met or exceeded?
I admittedly do not listen to podcasts. I know, Taylor, I know you listen to a lot of podcasts. Jon, you make podcasts and listen to podcasts. I've listened to one podcast. I listened to the first season of Serial and I loved it. And then I never listened to another podcast. So I actually had no expectations. I did not know what to expect. I didn't, again, like I said, mentioned earlier, I didn't know if anyone would want to listen to our podcast, and I'm delighted and thrilled that people have been and seem to be enjoying it, I hope. So yeah, I can answer that quickly because it was like totally uncharted territory for me. Thankfully, my friends know a lot more about this space than I do, and so I've just sort of been along for the ride and enjoying getting to like hang out, really.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of saw this all the way through. It's playing out exactly as I sort of planned,
Hmm.
which is exciting, validating.
Very Ezra.
No, I'm having a good
So
time. I'm having a good
Ezra,
time.
right?
I'm having a good time. It's been very fun, and I don't know that I necessarily had expectations. I listen to podcasts every day. I go on a run every morning. I listen to a podcast, and I think it's a fun way that people connect with you in a sort of deeper way. And I think, especially now in the world, we're just looking for truth. And when people are sharing their truth in whatever way it is, that connects. And I think we see a major sort of response to when people aren't being sincere or truthful. And people don't get mad; they just don't really listen or tune in. And so I think as long as we're just staying truthful at all, I think it's gonna continue to be fun. But I'm digging the show.
I bet. I mean, John, JC, what about you two?
I mean, I can answer just in that the, the biggest surprise for me that has been awesome is how easily like I was welcome in. I've done other podcasts and uh from the people on the podcast to fans to everything is like, oh no, this guy's talking again. Where with Pot of Rebellion, everybody's like, oh, I love the fact check. So it's been really nice to be like from day one, like welcome in and people are excited about when I open my mouth without having to like work so hard to earn it. Um, but like going off of what Taylor said, like and touching back to your format question about the podcast is, you know, podcast is a long form entertainment in a world of TikTok and short form and less than 90 seconds on Instagram and quick hits. You get to sit with these guys and share memories with them over the course of 45 to 60 minutes. And in that way, you bond with the people you're listening to. And it's completely different than like your favorite influencer or social media personality that you're consuming in bite-sized bits. And I think that's the coolest part about this podcast and the format of not just going nitty-gritty about like, well, in the background, the Orabesh says this, because you can get that any number of spots, again, on TikTok, but to like get to spend half an hour in these guys' headspace, what it was like making the first Disney era Star Wars, I think is pretty unique and pretty cool. And I get a front row seat to that.
But we still need you to talk about that Orabesh.
The Orabesh. We still need to talk
And he
tell us
has,
about it.
Yeah, but it's true. Like podcasts are now the biggest podcasts in the world are getting more downloads and listens than anything ever on TV. Ever by a country mile. So it's like it's just easy to listen to and you can get to I like listening to books on tape, but it's not the same. It's a little more difficult. There's something very immediate and piggybacking on what JC said, that's a lot deeper than a 60-second reel or TikTok. And I think that's why people have gravitated to it so much. I mean, it's shaping culture now.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
because you know, our generation, the five of us here, were born into like a analog era that became digital, where the younger generation was born to digital and they're discovering the analog era. So it's like they're born into this sort of surface level entertainment, Vines, TikTok, whatever it is. But you know, the other thing I think about, and then what JC and Taylor just touched on just now, made me think about the fact that back in the day when you had actors talk about the project, they maybe go on the Tonight Show for 5 minutes, and that's all they get. They show a clip, and you're learning very little about this person. They're just an extension of the product. Where now these opportunities to carve your own narrative are there, which I think is such a beautiful thing, especially for these three, because we know obviously the characters and how those stories began, middle, and end, but the fact that Tia, Taylor, Vanessa get to tell their story in their own words on this podcast, which happens to have a substantial platform thanks to iHeart. I think that's really cool. And you know, me personally, I always had a feeling that this would take off. It did take off quicker than I thought it would, because when we launched the first trailer, the response was like, "Oh wow!" Like it's like people were waiting for somebody to give permission to really talk about Rebels, like take the toothpaste out of the tube. And since then, it keeps on growing week after week, as you saw on the socials, and it's so positive because we talked about this on a previous press interview a couple of weeks ago. How really want to create like a safe space because, as we know, fandoms can get very divided for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But that's not to say everyone has to get along with everything. Just look up the jetpack versus lightsaber debate. We don't have to go there. I'm just saying it's in the archives. But we're hoping to normalize conversations where, yeah, we may not see eye to eye on a certain opinion, but at the end of the day, we can walk away respectfully and still love each other. And we're trying to just do that by leading by example.
Yeah, you can still be civil without having to agree on everything.
As is evidenced by Taylor and my
Yeah, that's
entire
my life.
relationship.
That's every day.
Well, I do want to just give Jon and JC even more of a shout out. I know what we bring to conventions and panels, and it touches people's hearts in a way that they'll come up to us after and say, I wasn't going to come to your table, but I was so moved by watching how much you guys actually love each other that I just wanted to come and like say hi. And then I give them food from my purse that is like an ever flowing source of nourishment for anyone who needs it. But adding Jon and JC, the bookend on either side of that, it is such a soulful hug, and I am so pleased that my expectations are ridiculously exceeded by, yes, it is well accepted, but it's also I couldn't imagine it without it. And I just want to like take a moment to say thank you both for all your hard work and all the socials. 100% the video that we offer on our socials, that is their editing and incredible hustle at all times, like all hours. And they're already doing a million other jobs, including for JC, a whole family, and there's a lot going on. And I just want to say thank you for your dedication to that on a weekly basis. Fans really look forward to it. And I love getting DM messages from people that I haven't met yet who say, I got one this morning. Hey, I had said on socials that you're like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. When you said that your character was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I had a special moment and I was able to, write back with this person. I don't know them, but this is what I'm saying is that the podcast has afforded even more connections to people that hopefully we will meet in person someday.
Mhm.
And so in that sense, it has 100% exceeded expectations. So thank you and yay.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
I second that.
absolutely.
Thank you and yay.
Well, thank you, and welcome me into the fold and everything. But also, the three of you make JC and my jobs really easy in terms of crafting these clips and editing. Now, if the show wasn't great, then it's like, well, yeah, or we really got to earn it here. But it's JC and I we're texting each week, obviously, as the episodes are being put together. Like, what could the social clip be this week? And we have the greatest problem in the world because it's like, well, we have too many good things to choose from. So like the social clips we even have out there, we actually have a whole coffer of other unreleased social clips that we're going to put out there at some point.
Load 'em
So
out.
yeah, but it's coming. It's coming. We're going to feed that algorithm beast a little bit, but
Have something to look forward to.
absolutely. And it's just very what Vanessa touched on and what everyone's touching on here. It's a very, we're our starting five, to use the basketball analogy. And, it's just like the triangle offense of the Bulls and the Lakers didn't work unless everybody bought in. And everybody here certainly bought into it. And it's a very symbiotic, cohesive relationship.
Despite the expectations that you've already had laid out for the podcast, as you mentioned earlier, Jon, you just wrapped up season 1, so congratulations.
Thank you.
What are your hopes for the future of the podcast as you advance to the remaining seasons?
Oh, I mean,
More listeners?
yeah.
Well, one of the things that it's sort of an extension of what Jon had said, that we're trying to create a safe place for people. But one of the things on that same text chain that we had talked about that would set our podcast apart is that we could focus on people who are behind the scenes who don't necessarily get a ton of credit or look at issues like, people of color in Star Wars, women of color in Star Wars. And I think we want to take more of a look at some inclusiveness and diversity and stuff like that, where we can have conversations. I mean, having Dante here was really wonderful to hear his journey creatively. And, I hope that we have more opportunities like that ahead. We'll definitely have more of the actors who join us subsequently in the following seasons. We love taking the fan questions. We definitely are going to do more added bonus content where we get to answer the fans' questions and celebrate the fan art and stuff like that. So we even have plans to put together a sabacc game with the Sabacc League. There's a bunch of cosplaying Heras, cosplaying Sabines. We're hoping to do episodes with them. So, I mean, really the opportunities are limitless to celebrate and give voice to people who don't necessarily always get the spotlight. But we hope that we're a place where people can do that and feel safe to do so.
And George Lucas would be great if he came on as a guest. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Wow.
I'm saving that for the very end. Saving that for the very end.
I mean, John, wasn't that in our text chain at the beginning, or am I misremembering? I that's what I seem to remember our goals were, to like really bring everyone in.
Oh, I
Oh.
thought you were talking about George Lucas. I was like, I was not on that section.
Oh, no. Sorry.
But I'm sure that was there too, because we
Aim
say a lot on
high,
our text.
baby, aim high.
Well, yeah, I'm good.
But yeah, to echo what Vanessa just said, I mean, we knew that the flagship part of the podcast obviously was revisiting the episodes of Star Wars Rebels, but we came in with the mindset of, well, let's think bigger, because this is really going to be a community we're building, and an extended Rebels family, if you will, with the people that listen and the people that interact on social media and write into our emails and ask questions that everybody that get to be answered on the podcast. And Lauren, you just mentioned the standalone mental health episode we just released. That's really hopefully going to be a running series within the series, because there's so many abundant themes, as you know, throughout the show and anything you watch. And if we can unwrap some of maybe the mental health of Ezra and Hera and Sabine at different points of Rebels, I think that's just going to get people to maybe look at the show differently, look at the characters differently, but also aspiring writers and filmmakers. It may enrich them to be like, oh, this is the kind of thought I can put into building characters and making memorable stories. So, we're trying to do it all, but we know it starts at certain places and we build towards it.
We had talked about having athletes on as we have all kinds of fun things yet to explore. So all in good time.
I'm hoping that we can just do. I hope that I could pass a trivia test. Tia as well. I'm not including this at the end of all of this. That we've picked up some stuff that, if we did trivia and JC guide us through, that we could do all right. Because I feel like I'm picking some stuff up.
Like, are we talking like you guys are competing against me?
No,
Or is it
no,
like,
no.
I was about to say, like, against
delusional.
them,
I'm not
'cause
delusional.
hold on now.
I think Taylor probably means he and I would compete against
Oh,
each other,
no,
because
I
that's
see.
like even playing, like even the playing field.
You
But
win and they lose run.
Also, I feel like, are you suggesting JC comes up with the trivia questions? I feel like we should just quiz each other.
Oh, I mean, it would be terrible.
No, I feel you. I feel like
I
I'm
just
learning a
mean
lot.
like in the sense that if there were a Star Wars Jeopardy, that we could make a little bit of money on it. You know?
That could be
As long as it's not JC.
That's what I mean. No,
coming up
not
with the
competing with
questions.
anyone else on this show. No,
Okay.
they would already take the grand prize.
Yes, for sure.
But also,
think-
Taylor, I know you, and I know how like when you
I'm
when
picking
you set
stuff
your
up, I
mind to it.
promise.
When you set your mind that, okay, this is happening. If you're selected for Star Wars Jeopardy, I know you, man. Like, I've seen you play. We've played board games together many a times. Even when you were new to it, you pick it up within mid-round. Then the next time around, you're like, okay, I'm gonna win this one. So I think the opportunity is gonna come along, and once you set your focus on it, I think I don't think JC's gonna be out of a job, because that's just, that's not gonna happen. But
It'll be me, ChatGPT, and Wikipedia for a few days.
Heart of a champion.
I think for me, just looking in a different direction, because for decades of my life were dedicated to learning about Star Wars and reading all the behind the scenes and things like that. If you take a 1,000-mile view at Rebels, it's a new hope of the Disney era, the post-Lucas era of Star Wars. So if you want to find out any information on A New Hope, it's there. There are books, there are podcasts, there are videos that have come out. There's so much there that you can pick up, a J.W. Rinsler book and find out what Alec Guinness's birthday cake looked like in 1976 in the Tatooine desert. And there's audio that's been released of Mark Hamill talking about it back in the day. we hopefully we can be something like that for Star Wars Rebels, where, you know, even 10 years today, everybody talked about rewatching it and what it means now. There's been so much Star Wars that's come out since Rebels, right?
Yeah.
And if this is the foundation of the Disney era Star Wars, you've seen all of this stuff come out. To go back to where it all started and rewatch it with the perspective, not just of like, well, it's been 10 years of Rebels, but we've gotten Obi-Wan and Andor and the Acolyte and all of this other Star Wars, to go back and see where it started and how it captured the feeling of A New Hope and a Star Wars relaunch with Disney, and the characters and the thought that went into building this show. I think it really helps you, looking at everything that's come since, appreciate how good the show is, and it's pretty clear why the podcast is doing well and why the show endures to this day as, I think, the #1 rated Star Wars thing on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, Star Wars Rebels is one of my favorite Star Wars productions, period. And 2 years ago for the Nerds of Color, I even wrote a piece explaining why you need to watch Star Wars Rebels in its entirety.
Wow.
It's a beautifully done show, and getting to relive it through all of you, however many years after the fact, has been really wonderful so far. So yeah, I mean, congratulations on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to the future episodes to come. And also, I just want to thank you all for your time today. I know that it's a bit of a hustle to get all of you together at once, so it really means a lot.
Well,
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much for chatting with
Yeah,
us.
thank you for having us.
And Lauren, I'm just going to say, since you wrote that article 2 years ago, I feel like once Holly was running it up the ladder at iHeart, they must have seen your article and gone, well, look at this. If Nerds of Color's talking about it, then we can't miss out on this. But on that, I do want to thank you, Lauren, and also just shout out to Keith Chow, who the founder of Nerds of Color. Yeah, and well, Keith is somebody who invited me onto the Nerds of Color podcast like years ago, before anyone was really tracking anything I was doing. He was the one interested in what I was up to, because he saw that I had some sort of hustle and I was working my way towards getting something accomplished. And so I'm always appreciative of Nerds of Color. So when Keith reached out after the trailer dropped, it was a resounding yes. And then we got connected, and I know it was a bit of a start and stop, but we're here now. So I do want to thank you all and what you do at Nerds of Color, because we literally were recording this morning with a special guest that we won't reveal yet, but we did touch on the topic of making the invisible visible, and that's what Nerds of Color is doing. So we do see you and appreciate you.
Thank you so much, John. I know that Keith, when he sees this, I'm sure he will appreciate it just as much.
Well, he better. No, I'm just kidding.
Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The Hard Knock